All right, well, let's get started. Thank you everyone for joining us once again for our second visioning session for the 79th Street Invest Southwest Corridor, which includes both the South Shore community and South Chicago. Please advance the slide. So the agenda for today is the same as it was last week. We're doing workshop, we will cover workshop goals, the corridor research, corridor information, market conditions, opportunity sites, and then a group discussion. Um, so the people that are involved, as you can see listed on this side, from the community residents, business owners are welcome, Southeast Chicago Chamber of Commerce, the Community Development Corps as corporation, as well as the South Shore Chamber of Commerce. On the city side, we have the Chicago Central Area Committee team. Representatives from different companies are on this line to help and assist in visioning 79th Street Corridor. That's RTKL, Habitat, HED Design, V3 Companies, Burn Walsh LLC, Arcadia's, the Alderman, both Mitchell and Alderman Harris, DPD, DOH, CDOT, and CTA. So the goals of this workshop is to determine, and a lot of this may be review, but we do understand that sometimes new people join the line. So we just like to provide a brief uh, overview of what we've discussed in the past. So the goals of this workshop is to determine parcel specific development possibilities and priorities for 79th Street, which would allow us to create new amenities and businesses to benefit South Shore and South Chicago, and develop publicly owned land, and where feasible, um, partner with private owners for larger projects. So what CCAC is doing, they're providing the members of this organization that come from professional arenas, multitude of backgrounds from marketing, real estate, um, development backgrounds, architects, design firms. They're providing all of this technical service to us for free. Part of their responsibilities that they're doing, assistance that they are providing, is real estate analysis and urban design work to help support these RFPs for development opportunities, technical assistance and relationship building with local developers and contractors, and to show visible improvements to show the progress on the corridor. Next slide. So we thought we would talk a little bit about why an RFP. So an RFP helps us establish a vision for the site based on community input. So the sites that we showed last time, we're taking back what was said in the corridor plan, what was said in the TIF plan, what was done in the implementation of the Invest Southwest corridor, what stakeholders have said online, and we're using all that information, that input, to establish design excellence and connect it with market realities so that we can proactively set the agenda for transformation rather than rather than reacting to what a developer brings to us. We RFP is a process that we feel will create competition. We solicit multiple responses to the RFP, which will create a competitive environment, and it'll make sure that the developers and the designers are putting forth their best effort. Next slide. Another reason why we thought that leading from the visioning of this workshop to an RFP, we are trying to create more of a transparent process. So I want you to be assured that the community engagement throughout the process will allow you guys to give us information or input on site visioning, evaluation, and criteria, and that will lead up to a proposed selected respondent. What are the criteria for selecting an RFP? So these are some of the things that will be in the RFP that we will use internally to shortlist the respondents to the RFP. So when they find, we found that when diversity and inclusions are prerequisites, short and long-term community wealth building is seen. I believe this is a quote from our commissioner. Don't quote me on it, but one of the quotes is bidding teams form through creative and innovative partnership models that showcase equitable control, ownership, and or decision-making authority for Black and Latinx partners. Diversity and inclusion, when we make this a prerequisite, the expectation is that the bidding teams and partnerships reflect the demographics of the community area where the development will take place. Next slide. So, 8 of the 12 Invest Southwest proposals that we received on the first round of the Invest Southwest RFP were led by minority developers, as you see here. So the second prioritization um, looks at inclusive design processes to foster better design in the neighborhood. And these are some pictures of some examples of when we stress the design of projects and what was, what the output would be. So the city also has, and will list in the RFP, a list of pre-qualified design service firms because we're tired of the same old thing in our Black and brown neighborhoods. We want it to be innovative. We want it to, yes, um, go along with the street wall, but bring something attractive and vibrant to that corridor. These are other collage of proposed development that when designers worked with the architects and worked with a developer that produced a better design than what was normally received. Next slide. So neighborhood roundtables are very critical to bring the voice of the community organizations, the aldermen, the businesses, etc., to the same table, where we can discuss ongoing development and priorities for city investments and share that feedback across all departments. So when we first rolled out the Invest Southwest corridor, over 100 community meetings were held, including 88. We've had 88 roundtables throughout the city or throughout the south and west sides during the first year of the Invest Southwest core initiative. Next slide. So this slide here, we find out from the input of stakeholders what buildings really mean and whether or not, even though if the building is not landmarked, is it significant that we all should be looking at trying to rehab that building or maintain that building? What does it mean to the community? What historical significance does a property mean to the community? And so these are some examples of some things that we recently received an RFP on, where, for example, the firehouse in Inglewood, there's a development for that, and the building structure will remain because the community pointed to that building as being significant to their neighborhood and their community. Next. So this is this is what we're doing now. The CCAC is bringing together massings for different sites, and we're looking for the stakeholders to tell us what feels right, what looks right. The colors represent different programmatic uses like retail, housing, etc. And so this is the process that we're in right now. So when you need inclusive selection process, so we're looking at sustainability. We're looking at driving community wealth, or promoting that. We're looking at developers partnering with local organizations to make things happen. And this is all done via the roundtables and via, well, they're developing their or partnerships. It's not done via roundtable, but the input from the stakeholders at a roundtable is important. And this is just an example of, I guess this is a screenshot of a community process for Austin, the Austin RFP. Next slide. So we're currently in our step one of the visioning and engagement process, and I will say that we're we're hoping that we're about a month or so towards the end of the step one process. We did do some things early on, so this was not a consecutive 3 months, but we're visioning and engaging the stakeholder group, engaging the consultants, which is CCAC. They're doing the site due diligence. We're setting the criteria, which we just walked through, and the RFP goals, which will be some of the input, will be the input from the stakeholders. So the next step to this process will be to market to development community. We will release that RFP. Initially, I stated that we will be looking at releasing an RFP at the end of March, to slow down the process to make sure that everybody had a good feel about what we're doing. We got an extension to April 20th. So April 20th, we will be releasing an RFP for that selected site. The next step in the process will be the evaluation period, in which the city will do internal evaluation first, a short list, and then we will have each respondent on that short list come to the community, make a presentation. During that time, we're asking for additional information. And then the last step would be where the successful respondent is selected. And then we will still have other community engagement based upon what was already heard or stated by the stakeholders, until we get to the point where we are internally uh, um, completing the redevelopment agreement and doing all of the regulatory approval process, and get to city council for final approval. Next slide. So that was my brief overview. I'm gonna turn it over to Nicholas of RTKL to talk about the corridor research.
Thank you. So previously, the city has studied this corridor through a couple different efforts. One was in 2002, and that was the Avalon South Shore TIF plan. And then last year, the city published the South Shore Corridor Study, which focused more broadly on the overall needs of the corridor and neighborhood. So that South Shore Corridor Study was based on input from 500 residents, business owners, and other community stakeholders. And they proposed 10 ideas for action for the South Shore community. And those are have a clear framework for development, market South Shore corridor opportunities, advance community-led arts and culture, advance community-led greening and open space enhancements, market corridors as places for culture and entertainment, enhance key node public realm and transit, encourage building renovation at key nodes, attract infill development at key nodes, activate corridors between those nodes, and plan for long-term capital. So those were the overall goals for the South Shore community. And we this right now are looking at more pinpointed development ideas for specific sites along the 79th Street corridor. So in looking at retail along 79th Street, we created a retail trade area, which is about a half mile north and south of 79th Street. And you can see in this map pinpointed some of the retail uses along the corridor, mostly convenience stores and small takeout restaurants and small retail shops. We also looked at the market area demographics, and so we have about 40,000 households. A household is average 3.2 people. The median income is $35,000. 30% owners, 51% renters, and 18% vacants. The age is about middle age, 45 to to 54, but most of the population is between 25 and 74. And as you can see, the race is majority Black. So the retail market potential, we looked at these numbers last time, and we advanced this number looking at retail leakage, which means the amount of money that the neighborhood sees leave the neighborhood for services. So about $200 million is spent outside the neighborhood that could be spent in the neighborhood. We also last time sent a link to a survey, which I think will pop up in the chat here, hopefully, if Camilla could add that, to participate in just a neighborhood survey that looks at a couple questions, one of which is what are words and adjectives you would want to describe 79th Street in 10 years? So kind of aspirational, what you all hope to see. And we've gotten about 30 responses. Vibrant, welcoming, attractive, friendly, comfortable. These are the words that people want to see be used to describe 79th Street. Some of the words that are less interested are bold, adaptable, cozy, and edgy. We also asked what is missing from your neighborhood. So the main responses were an ice cream shop, a bakery, entertainment venue, grocery store, and then senior housing, market rate housing, co-op. Those are uses that people didn't feel were missing as much. And then the last one we'll look at, there's more questions, but the last one we want to kind of focus on here are what are the 79th Street's biggest opportunities for change. So where would respondents like to see change? So shopping, restaurants, community events are some of the more popular responses to this one. And one question we had was what do people on the call today think of when they think of community events?
How would you define community events?
I, I, I describe it as pop-ups and or a space for community organizations to gather.
That's awesome. Anyone else? Thank you for that response. Pop-ups. That's a great temporary use until someone solid could be found. So I think that's a great idea. Any other?
Hi, Lisa. I think maybe customer attraction events. I think one of the trends that we're starting to see is more concerts and entertainment along the corridors on the street that will have a positive impact on the businesses within the community. For example, the Hyde Park Block Club that they do annually, that has a very significant impact on the bottom line of the businesses in the community. So I think
Great
that
idea.
is something that we should definitely focus on. And also more concerts. One of the biggest community engagement events and attractions is the South Shore Summer Festival. And that event is very popular. It's a family friendly event for all ages and demographics. And I think it would be ideal to have more events like that in the South Shore community.
So specifically on 79th Street, um, I think it's a wonderful idea. But my question would be, are we ready for something like that right now? Or would this be a future?
Well, I mean, if you think about in terms of the timing, if we plan now, I think maybe going into 2022, we definitely could be ready for something like that. Greater Auburn Gresham Development Corp, they have a street festival every year, which is highly successful.
Mhm.
And one would argue that their demographics are very similar to ours.
Mhm.
And I don't see why we could not do something similar in the South Shore community.
Thank you for that. Thank you for diving into that a little bit more. It's beginnings are never futile, right? We can always grow it, right? It could start off as a block 79th Street Block
Yeah.
Club Festival. It could always be grown. But I thank you for your
Can,
response on
can
that.
I add this to it?
Sure.
I I
Absolutely.
would like to see a parade that goes from Stony Island over to probably exchange of the neighbors and the community people walking together in unity uh, to show other communities the versatility and what we have along that 79th Street corridor as a community.
Absolutely.
Hmm.
Change the perception.
That would draw a lot of attention to 79th because 79th Street have a perception now of disunity and dissatisfaction, but to bring a group of people together and have a parade down there with the children and
Yes.
senior citizens, uh, businesses, homeowners,
Mhm.
to show the unity and the growth of that corridor. I think that will not only help South Shore, but it would give a different view for people in the city of Chicago, period, of 79th Street.
Thank you so much, Mr. Dillard. I think that is an important comment that you and previous stakeholders have made about what you mean regarding community events. If
I
there,
want to just add to that if I might, because I think that it really can happen almost as quickly as we're ready for it to happen. If not this year, then certainly for sure by next, to have the entire area that we're talking about, or at least most of it, as a sort of pop-up street festival, because I think people have to see possibilities sometimes. Sometimes you have to show what it's going to look like. And you could do it even with activating vacant spaces by putting displays in the window and having them as art galleries and doing things on the vacant lots and having sort of the flea market kind of atmosphere on the upscale level that you see in other communities that, on the weekends, that bring people to a space and make them see how vibrant it could be and want to really work and move toward that.
I want to thank everybody for their comments. This will definitely be something the roundtable could revisit in the future. Um, if you have any additional comments, I would like to encourage you to put it in the chat. But I would like to for us to move on so we can
Mhm.
get to the item of today.
So just want to encourage people to go ahead and click the link that's in the chat to take the survey. We have added some questions relevant to today's
Yes, I think
meeting.
we lost you.
So we also have looked at some of the previous development priorities on 79th Street. We talked about these last time, entertainment, arts and culture, and greening and open space. And then as well as focusing on the key nodes, which would be the intersect on this corridor, the intersection of 79th and Exchange, as well as the intersection of 79th and Stony Island. Building renovation and residential infill vacant lots and encourage senior housing. We have also are looking at one of the nodes in particular, the Stony Island and 79th Street intersection, and possibilities for updating that as well to make it more pedestrian friendly. Related priorities are just additions to the previous development priorities. So positive private investment, invest in existing assets and public safety concerns. So these are the kind of things we're looking at when we're looking at an RFP for specific sites. I don't know who's on from Habitat, but maybe you could.
Yes, I am. Steve's on. Thanks. Next slide, please. So we are exploring 79th Street, as Nick said, from Stony Island on the west to Exchange on the east, about a mile and a half, 2 miles. The market conditions, as many of you are well aware, there are quite a few community anchors and assets in the area. There are hospitals, there are quite a few schools, there are community centers. There is a tremendous demand for active retail, as we've heard now in 2 visioning sessions. There is significant car traffic on 79th. When a bunch of us walked 79th about a month ago in a snowstorm, there was tremendous car traffic and bus traffic, which was very good to see. There is very good commuter rail linkage at Exchange and 79th on the east. And it is considered one of the strongest corridors north of 87th. Some of the challenges, as Nick alluded, there is quite a bit of retail leakage on spending. I think it was 200 million is leaving the area. Commercial rents actually and residential rents are both very challenging. There's, I think the slide said 18% vacancy. It may even be higher than that on the retail side on the corridor. So rents are fairly low at this point. And so attracting a new development that would pay market is a bit of a challenge. There are quite a few abandoned storefronts there. There's no new multifamily. So we've received some input that people are not necessarily looking for new multifamily, but there is not any new either renovated or new construction multifamily. And this is why the city is driving this through Invest Southwest and others. Development on this corridor will need significant public subsidy to be realized.
Nick, can you go to the next? Just to review, we're about a month into the site evaluation process, and we started out looking at about 12 or so sites. Some are city-owned, some are privately owned, some are small sites, some are large sites, some are contiguous properties. There's a couple that are divided into 2, either by a privately owned property in the middle or by a street. But in general, we've tried to evaluate all of the sites based on proximity to transit and to size and to potential lasting impact to 79th Street. In general, you can do more and you can affect the street more with a larger site rather than a smaller site. Next. So where we are right now, and you've seen some of this from last week, is a site on the north side of 79th across from the Regal. That's one of the ones that is divided in 2 by a privately owned property. The Manistee site, it's also a couple of properties that are divided by Manistee, although there is the potential for vacating part of Manistee in order to create a larger contiguous property. And then the third one is the Exchange site. Sometimes we call it the Gateway site on both the north and south sides of 79th. And we will get into the evaluations and the way we planned for these sites in just a minute. But again, what we're looking at is the ability for any of these sites to make an immediate and lasting impact on 79th, as well as to potentially trigger other developments on 79th in the future. Next.
So the first site that we're going to focus on today is the Manistee site, which is at 79th and Manistee. It's actually two properties that are split by Manistee. These are city-owned properties. They are between 2711 and 2733 East 79th Street. They're currently zoned B3-2, and that gives you an FAR of about 2.2. This is the existing condition at the Manistee site. So our first alternate looked at a mixed use development here, a possibility with retail on the first floor and residential on above on the west, and then retail with office / live work on the east. So this option was about 82,000 square feet total, with 18,000 square feet of retail split by Manistee, and it yields about 58 residential units with 26 parking spaces. The second alternate for the Manistee site focuses mostly on the western side of Manistee. This is similarly a mixed-use development with retail on the first floor and residential above, and with a community park on the eastern site. This yields a building of about 56,000 square feet with about 10,000 square feet of retail and 50 residential units. Some of the adjustments we made on both these sites are to the massing to make them more pedestrian friendly and more welcoming to people walking on the street. The third option was to close Manistee from the public alley to 79th in order to give a site that was more usable to one large retailer or a number of smaller ones. A large retailer we're thinking a grocer of about 38,000 square feet. This would have parking on the roof and be a single use. So you can see how this sits here. We would need to close off Manistee, from the alley, and then rethink how traffic flow would work. So some of the pros and cons for the Manistee site are, the pros are it's adjacent to the Metro and 79th Street bus line. It could provide a spark for the 79th Street and Exchange TOD district, and improve existing vacant land on the corridor, and the land is city owned. The cons are it's more distant from existing grocery options, meaning people in this area typically have to drive to get groceries. The site is split by Manistee, which makes it difficult for larger development. It's difficult to park again as well for larger developments. The parking on the roof is an expensive option that would be difficult to sell to a grocer. And then based on last week's meeting, we added some community comments. So we talked last week about how a grocer is needed in the area for residents to walk to, and that people were open to the idea of closing Manistee if it brings the right development. So here are our three options. Just back to front, and you can see that they're more and less dense as you work your way through alternate 1, 2, and 3. One of the things that the survey now asks, if you click the link in the survey, is which of these alternates do you feel would be a good catalyst for development on the site? So just wondering what people's feelings are on these three options at Manistee in general.
You're looking for a response now?
Yeah.
Okay. So alternate site alternative site 1 has retail, residential, and parking. Can you walk through the color schemes? There's no key code for them.
Yeah. So the purple is an office use, probably medical office. The bluish color is retail. So the first floor, ground floor on all along 79th Street would be retail. And the yellow is residential. So the entry to the residential would be down Manistee. And then green is terrace for residents of the building. And then you can see an alternate 2, same color scheme. Blue is retail. This one has residential entry off of 79th, and then a park on the eastern side, as well as in option or alternate 3, just a large retail option there with parking on the roof. Okay, we'll move on to the next site.
No one has any opinions on which alternate site they have a good feeling about?
I will speak to it a little bit. I think what we're doing on the site, you know, as you asked the question, as we look now and then try to look 10 years down the road, is trying to fill both of those. I think on the site, to be very honest, and maybe what we're doing along 79th shouldn't be permanent plans, but should be, you know, temporary plans to try to let the street evolve a little bit as we talk about what happens on the other end of 79th Street. So for me at this point, I guess I would go with 3, saying that we make a big box out of it, and then it's available for what it is now and could be available, you know, going forward.
Thank you. Thank you. Please, I want to encourage everybody to please look at that survey again. If you don't want to speak publicly, please choose via the survey. Go ahead.
So looking at the western site, this is the one that's across the street from the Avalon Regal. This site is also split, but it's split by a privately owned 2-story building at the end of Southeast End Avenue, where it intersects with 79th. This is between 1700 and 1727 East 79th Street. It's city-owned parcels, again, split by a privately owned, and it is also zone B32, the 2.2 FAR. Here's the existing condition. There's and that existing 2-story building is where you see that east side phone store. So alternate number 1 is mixed use again, with retail and office on the western side, and then retail and residential on the eastern. This building is about 48,000 square feet with 13,000 square feet of retail, and it yields about 23 residential units with a mix of 2-bed, 1-bed, and studios. You can see the massing again from the last call. We adjusted the massing to make it more pedestrian friendly and a little bit more friendly to the street. You can see here the purple again is office. The yellow is senior or some kind of housing, and then the blue is neighborhood serving retail. The second alternate is similar, but we did add a cultural hub. This would be a place for people to gather and have lessons, music lessons, or some sort of a small music performance space. So retail, cultural hub, and residential entry on the first floor with residential above. Similar massing to the first alternate, but with that cultural hub in there. The third option pulls the cultural hub back off of 79th Street and gives a little room to a community park, which could also serve as a pop-up space for the cultural hub outdoor performance space. This option is 53,000 square feet total, with about 5,800 square feet of retail, and would yield about 48 units between 2-bed, 1-bed, and studios. You can see here the community park on the street. So some pros and cons for this site are it could spark reuse of the Avalon Theater. It's an opportunity to spur the entertainment district that was discussed in the South Shore corridor study. It has access to the 79th Street bus line, and it's closer to the existing grocery at 75th and Stony Island, the jeweler. Also, it utilizes city-owned properties. Some of the cons are that it's more distance from the Metro line. It includes a privately owned building that reduces the site size. Also, the site depth is less than the Manistee site at 100 feet, so it's more difficult to do efficient parking on. And then it might involve that demolition of that existing building or some sort of reuse of that existing building. From our last meeting, the comments were that this site depends heavily on the Avalon Regal redevelopment, and it could attract younger residents to the area with that cultural space, which was a good thing. So here are 3 alternates. I don't know if the people on the call have any comments about these. Again, the color scheme is similar.
Do we have anyone on here from the Alderman's office? And can we speak to what's apparently there are things happening at this location or around there with the studio that's going in there that would affect all of this. I don't know if we're building the right thing for what's happening in the area.
This is Lisa Washington. So we are not currently in conversations with the owner of the Regal Theater. We do believe that these sites would be more beneficial with the activation of the Regal Theater. Yes, there is something going on in the 5th Ward across Stony Island from the Regal Theater regarding a studio sound stage. And so we are currently exploring ideas with them. But at this time, we think that, what do you guys think? I think that this edge should be held for that reactivation of the Regal. I think that it's going to evolve. I do believe it will evolve once the studio begins to break ground. But at this time, there's no other details that I really can share.
Okay, well, we can move on to the third site.
Let me respond to Dr. Adams. Dr. Adams, there's no conversation currently because we don't have a deal. We don't have confirmation that moving forward, in order for the city to move forward with the Regal. So we're thinking about some things, but I would prefer to talk with that owner first before I put all of this out on the roundtable.
Yeah, I guess I'm just raising it because given the scope of the project, and that's sort of like the elephant in the room, that if we're talking about that area, the idea that we're not in conversation about it is puzzling.
Well, let me say it this way. We're not in public conversations about it. And, negotiations can be tricky. And I don't want to, there are some thoughts, but just thinking about, I'm going to take a moment and say this. Thinking about the Regal and what a developer would have to do to bring the Regal back to open is a very, very heavy undertaking. There, as you guys probably know, there's 2 trees growing out the roof. There's a split going up the back facade. There's a split going up the front facade, and there's still water in the basement. So we are
all things that can be taken care of
at a cost.
Yes, but that cost. I think you look
Dr. Adams, I'm not here to say that we're not. I said that we are having some thoughts, but it's not for public consumption yet. But I do want people to understand that that is a very heavy lift.
I'm fine with that.
And so
I'm fine with hearing that it's not for public consumption, as long as I know it's going on, that there's some level of discussion going on about it. That's all I was trying to
okay,
determine. But I
Okay.
know that everything isn't necessarily at the level of a public discussion at this point.
right. So I need to, we need to do some due diligence first before we can even proceed in conversation. Okay.
I
Right,
got you.
but what
And I
we
can
do
agree
know
with
that,
you on that Regal
Wait,
Theater.
one at a time. I missed somebody.
Okay.
Who?
this is Don. I was gonna say, what we do know is going on is over there is that studio. And if I were building something beside the Universal lot or Tyler Perry's lot, I'm not sure this is what I would be building. If that's what's going on there, shouldn't we be building things that are feeder to that studio to make sure that that works and that it is a success?
And that is why we are, if you allow the team to move on, you will see what their recommendation is. These are just thoughts. And as you stated, things can change, right?
Right.
So let's let the team move on to their next slide.
Okay, gonna just move on to the gateway site. So whomever's speaking from HED can take over.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. I'm Susan King. Yeah, thank you. Moved on to the next slide. So back at the east end of the site, once again, just to refresh everyone, it's these two parcels. The north parcel is currently zoned B32, and the south is currently zoned C12. And the areas are about they're almost equal, but in completely different geometry. So the north side is around 32,600 square feet, and the south a little larger at 37,000 square feet. And then I think everybody knows we're very near the Metra station, which is a plus. So it is considered a transit served location. I think that's good. Yeah, let's go. And they're privately owned. These are privately owned lots. So the conditions around the site, we had a bit of discussion last week. One of our questions, remains whether or not we work around some of the existing buildings that are on the sites, or if we everything gets, kind of blank slate with torn down. So that was the barbershop movie building on the previous slide, and then on the south side, there's two buildings: the white building on the corner, and then the building further south, which we've now learned was called the Ringler building. That was, again, quite a bit of discussion about that that building last week. The potential of saving that one is still on the table. We kind of all agreed that the one on the corner shown in this slide on the left is probably not worth saving, given the need to make a presence on the corner of the street and the state of the building as well. So go ahead and go to the next slide. So after the discussions last week, we were, sorry?
There's a chat, they're asking for the exact address.
Oh, which?
For the property you are speaking
the Ringler building?
That's
Hold on.
7915,
I have it.
but
I have it.
Yeah, it's on
Thank
the
you,
first
Nick.
slide, but yeah, I don't have the addresses memorized. Sorry.
The addresses are there's a bunch. So it's
If you guys could just give the addresses
it's
for the
70
building.
it's 7901 through 7933 South Exchange,
Thank
and
you.
then 7843 through 7850 South Escanaba.
Thank
Maybe
you.
somebody can put those in the chat or back, like as an answer.
Sure.
Thank you, Nick.
Sorry about that.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, so we were excited to find, this was talked about last week, that it was a bank, I guess, last, and we were able to find these photographs of the inside hall of that building, which we think are pretty cool. We do understand, though, apparently these were taken about 10 years ago, and unfortunately there's been water damage and things that have gone on, so it's probably not in the state that it was in these photographs, but it still looks like a very, very beautiful space. So again, when we get into the massing, we'll talk a little bit about, is that a potential place for a cultural hub or something to that effect as one possibility. We also wanted to show these two from Google Earth. We can tell kind of what a view would be from the site looking east. Again, responding to comments we heard last week. So on the left, the view is from the 4-story building that is on the north side of the property. You can kind of see it there in the corner. So you can see that at 4 stories, you're not really seeing the lake. I mean, you probably are at this time of year before the trees leaf out, but it's not at 4 stories, it's not a guaranteed view of the lake. And then on the right, though, this is actually taken from the building. There is a building just east of our site across the tracks that you can also see a little bit in the corner. If you can see my cursor here, probably not. But anyway, on the right-hand upper corner, there's a 7-story building. I'm sure you guys are all aware, just east of us. And so the view on the right is actually taken from their 7th floor. So even there at 7 stories, now you're starting to see the lake probably on a more consistent throughout the year, and again more so in the summer. So just to kind of clarify that even at like 4 or 5 stories from our site, you're probably not seeing the actual lake itself. So I think it's around a 10-minute walk from this site probably to the lake. And again, you guys live there, so you might know that better than me, but I think that's our understanding, is that's about, it's not a 2-minute walk. It's a good walk. So, okay, so now updating our alternates from last week. Before I launch into these two, I do want to say that after last week, we looked hard at the existing zoning just to make sure that it wasn't necessarily, that a development here might not really be feasible by right. And so again, so by right on the north parcel, you would be allowed, talking about housing anyway, in that context, 32 units. And on the south by right, you'd be allowed 37 units of housing. And in discussions with Habitat, representing kind of the developer world here, it was felt that those at those sizes, it wouldn't be economically feasible or appealing to a developer. So given that, then we moved forward again. And so alternate number 1 is looking at, on the north side, upzoning to B33, which is only 1 step because it's B32 now, and getting rid of the Barber building. And so that's what you're seeing here in this massing. And then the proximate residential unit count there is around 60 of rental apartments, and then 30 parking spaces, because that would be what would be allowed in B33. We would not have to do a plan development or anything or not we, but the developers responding would not have to plan for a plan development or anything like that with that kind of program mix. And then on the south side of the street, we actually are looking at what's modeled here is by right. And so it's the C12 thing. And the blue, we're proposing all retail here. So the colors are the same as what Nicholas was showing. So some kind of commercial use on the corner, keeping the Ringler building. And again, it could be a retail, it could be a restaurant, or it could become a cultural hub. Should the right kind of development team come in and plan for that, and then keeping the parking for that to the south. So I think we go with that to alternate number 2. So then alternate number 2, we went back to looking at keeping both of the buildings that were identified as maybe significant. So the barbershop building on the north and the Ringler building on the south. But again, looking, so how that changes, we're still getting, in this configuration with the massing of the residential, we're still getting around 60 plus units. And I believe, again, Steve from Habitat can comment on this later or now or correct me, but my understanding is 60 is probably a sweet spot for making something economically feasible in terms of housing use. So again, 33 parking spaces on that lot, an upzone on the north, but keeping by right on the south. Okay, and so I think we can go to the next one. And then the next one, we took one more approach at this, which would be kind of reverse of what we just, we'd said in alternate 1, I guess, where we keep the barbershop building on the north. It becomes, new retail, put an additional retail building next to it, kind of as infill between the two buildings that are existing there. But on the south side, we took a whole nother pass of a blank slate and what could you do to max out that site. So the thought, we're showing housing here, but it's a mixed, the concept is mixed use. So it could be housing, it could be commercial. And one other note, one other thought on this one is that the reddish brown color on the bottom right hand side, we're actually suggesting potentially walk up two-story townhomes tucked underneath a larger building. And the thought there was that would speak to kind of the scale of the residential as you move south on that street. And I think so. That's all of the alternates we have for today for the western site. I'm sorry, the exchange site, the eastern site. The pros and cons, most of which we talked about, last week. The metro station being a great plus for this site. The location, it's a welcoming point to the corridor. There's the potential to have two options here as part of the RFP. A developer could look at one or the other only separately, or look at the whole package together. And there is still, we heard last week that that maybe a grocery store isn't appropriate right at this point, but there is room for that should a developer decide that somehow they think that can make sense. And so again, we don't have to necessarily go through the cons, but they are privately owned parcels. And we're finding with the transit served location, at least for the programs we're presenting today, the parking seems to be working well. So that may not be as much of a challenge as we first thought. But then to move over again to repeat some of the community comments we heard from last week, proximity to the lake and park, maybe from the top floors, you're actually getting a little glimpse of the park, at least for sure, and maybe the lake at certain times of the year. The gateway we already talked about. We heard senior housing was not preferred, so we are just suggesting housing of rental, or it could be condo for sale. Ice cream shop, coffee shop. What can go into the bottom of either site is very flexible. And this new, the fact that the Ringler building, might be worth saving. Okay, next.
We received a comment in the chat saying that the Ringler building, they would like, Miss Young would like the Ringler building to be saved. I'll let Susan finish up, but I think we need to get some additional comments from the stakeholders about the Ringler building and the barbershop building. Go ahead, Susan.
Yeah, okay, so here's the kind of the comparison slide. If you want me to, so at the top, alternate one, the big difference is the barbershop building is gone, but we are keeping the Ringler building, some kind of mixed commercial space right on the corner on the south lot, and maybe the maximum type of housing that could occur on the north lot. Alternate 2 tries to keep both buildings, both of those existing buildings we've been talking about, but with similar programs. And then alternate 3 is a kind of a departure, especially on the south, because it removes the Ringler building. So any other, I guess, comments anybody wants to?
I think maybe we just hold off on the comments part till we get couple more slides through, and then we can talk more about the gateway site. So just as a rehash, we have the western site pros and cons here, which we just went over, the Manistee site pros and cons, as well as the gateway site pros and cons that Susan just went through. So based on this, our team is recommending an RFP for the gateway site. We're doing that because, in our opinion, this site has the highest potential to be a catalyst for the corridor. It does not rely on development of other properties like the western site. So it's independent of the studio or the Avalon Regal. It's closest to existing public transportation options, that being the Metro and the bus lines. It's the closest to Rainbow Beach and can serve any tourist or whomever comes from outside the neighborhood to visit. And it is the largest site in our three. And like Susan mentioned, since it's kind of split by 79th Street, it provides an opportunity for a developer to develop one side and then the other side, depending on how they feel the site will work best for them. And then again, it's just, we feel the best catalyst for future development for the whole corridor. And so I think now is probably a good time to kind of talk about what everyone's feelings are about that recommendation. And then we can get into some more detail about the gateway site, the options on the gateway site as well.
I would like to make a comment, if I may, if this is a good time.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
There at the Ringler building and the barber shop at the gateway, I can envision that becoming a beautiful attraction point by having a restaurant that's of class, and in it tells the history of the area in a very artistic manner, and a horticultural feature all on the outside that would really make that place a major draw, or potentially could be.
Mm-hmm.
I agree with you, Reverend Dillon. I think the Ringer building should be the visitor site, and we should show the plot because that's where the realtor developed South Shore. Thank you, Linda. That is the history of South Shore.
Yeah, and the history that a lot of people don't know, that are relatively new and young.
Mm-hmm.
The history is a wealth of things that can sometimes be not recognized until we start that conversation and doing a little bit more research on the history there.
You see the plot. What the story says is the developer there was the guy that developed the bungalow built that we all live in across here.
Right.
I agree with you, Reverend Dillon. That is the visitor site.
Oh, my name is Richard Dobbins.
Oh, I'm sorry, you sounded
No problem. No problem. I'm a horticulturalist, and so I'm looking at this from what attracts and what draw, and how to have a major impact just in when you walk through an area, how it look and feel, have a whole psychological impact upon people.
I think we may have hit something we can all agree on.
Mm-hmm.
So I hear you guys saying that the Ringer building is worth saving. You would like it to be a culturally significant restaurant, upscale restaurant that speaks to the history of South Shore. So I'm looking on the chat, and I see people all are agreeing with the Ringer. I see a few people agreeing with the Ringer building. No one's saying anything about the barbershop building. I just want to make that note.
I should say the barbershop movie building.
Right.
Barbershop movie building. You're right.
Yeah.
You're right.
Yeah. That's.
I've shortened it. I'm sorry.
No problem. Oh, that is so funny, Dr. Adams, that you would think that it should be an Alexander type restaurant and we're buying it from the owner, the former owner of the Alexander restaurant. That's interesting. Yeah, I have Mr. Ewing keeps mentioning streetscape, and I stated in the chat that streetscape will be a theme in the future roundtable. We have not forgotten. We know that is an important infrastructure improvement that people would like on 79th Street, and we will have that at a future roundtable. We're just currently trying to focus on getting this RFP and this catalytic process or a catalytic project completed as we move, before we move forward with other ideas. Any other questions or nothing about northeast, uh, the northeast building?
I think the
I
barber
think
shop.
I think a new development there would be really good for the area. That it just seems to be in constant disarray there, and with the mini mall across the street already, and that area right now has some issues with it with crime. I think it would be a big impact to have something bright, new, modern, clean with the Ringer building being rehabbed. I think that that would be a great mixture of both.
Okay. Thank
And
you.
Lisa,
Ask Lisa a little bit about the barbershop that nobody had commented. I think if it was an interesting kind of coffee shop place that used that movie as a theme, and there were other things developed adjacent to it, it could be interesting. You know,
And at one time there was a coffee shop there. Sheila, what was her name? I can't remember the name of the owner right now. But at one time there was a coffee shop right there at the corner.
with the other things going on that we're talking about, it can make it interesting. I
Mm.
think we would probably at some point have to address the mini mall as it is currently constituted.
I wonder if a question might be about the barbershop building and the Ringer building is if there was a development, some mixed use development that proposed to remove the barbershop building and was not, was not possible without removing the barbershop building, is it worth saying, no, we shouldn't do this development in order to save the barbershop building?
Absolutely not. I don't think it's
No.
significant.
No,
Yeah,
They just
because
got a movie in there. That's all.
yeah, I think that because I think we could have a restaurant or some other retail use in a new building there. But maybe that the answer is might be different for the Ringer building. Maybe that one is worth saving,
Yeah.
I don't
and
know.
Nick and team, I think that's great, a huge point, and we really appreciate the community comments on the barbershop building because that helps to crystallize our thinking there. And I think to Nick and Dr. Adams and the community inputs for the Ringer, one of the things that's intriguing or was intriguing to us is we could have multiple uses there. So you have this double height banking hall with offices above that could be a community space or restaurant. But then you have those retail storefronts that could be combined into this sit-down restaurant or an additional cultural feature that we're kind of hearing the community wanting. So there's an opportunity to do multiple things there. And what we're trying to do also is then identify any incentives that might support that restoration as part of the larger development.
Mm-hmm.
So does it make sense now to kind of move on to a little bit more detail about what we think about the Gateway site, or do people have other comments that they want to make?
I have one comment, and it's just regarding the timeline. So I'm excited to hear about the development, but you can bring a rehabbed building, you can bring new buildings, but unless we are ready to occupy those buildings with the businesses that matter to the community, then those new buildings or those rehab buildings will also sit vacant until we find someone to occupy. And for me, vacancy is not good. So I would really like for us to have our
So
entrepreneurs lined up, ready to occupy once those rehabbed or recreated buildings are in place. So that's just a general comment of mine.
So, Ms. Young, I want to thank you for pointing that out. And I will assure you that with the RFP process, the redevelopment agreement will require that they will have to have a certain percentage of occupancy prior to receiving certain in city incentives. So it is really going to be that developer bringing those uses and bringing them forward to the stakeholder to see if they approve of those uses to the table. And that is why it's so important that we new and confirmed and reconfirmed, and I might confirm again what type of uses you guys want, because that it will go into the RFP. The developer will know that you guys want a bakery, an ice cream shop, etc. And it will be on upon that developer to bring those uses. And again, they will not get their city incentives unless certain they reach a certain occupancy.
Okay, so thank you for that, Ms. Washington. So the other thing then that I would add though, is we also want some local entrepreneurs there. Because here's what I could see happening, Ms. Washington, because we are in the city of Chicago. We know how it works. The developers all have someone that's ready to open a business there so they can gain access to the funds. And 3 years from now or 1 year from now, they all jump ship and get the heck out of Dodge. So again, I would want to see some percentage where we have some local ownership, people who are maybe long-standing either entrepreneurs or interested in being entrepreneurs in South Shore, South Chicago, so we can have some continuity here.
Yes,
Can I
absolutely.
piggyback on
That
that?
is one of the, and wait a minute, absolutely. Sorry, Mr. Dillard. And that
Yeah,
is
it's
one of
okay.
the criteria for the RFP, is that we're looking to build community wealth. So that respondent that actually has those partners from the community will be seen more favorable than one that does not. Mr. Dillard, you had a response?
Yes, I just want to piggyback on that. I've lived in South Shore for over 50 years.
Mm-hmm.
I was here when that $200 million was spent up and down 79th Street. I was here when that Avalon Theater was the Avalon Theater. And that corridor was set up that catered to the people in the community. That's why 50-something years ago, we supported it. Now, what we need to do is to have businesses up and down that corridor that will draw the people in the community up there, because they'll continue to go to the suburbs as they did before and out of our community, such as shoe stores, clothing stores, things that people, I'm 82 years old, and I would just love to walk up on 79th Street and go to a coffee shop. Things that we need to draw people where they feel safe and that they can become a part of their community. All the things that I've heard so far, it sounds good, but will the people in the community participate in it? Or will there be people coming from out of the community? And as the young lady said before, we know how to deal work. There'll be more people out of the community participating. The people in our community, are we going to reach out to the people in our community to open and open those businesses up and down at those corridors? And when they do open up those businesses, will those businesses be business that will attract the people in the community? If we don't, we're going back to ground zero.
I think that's the intent of this process, though, to make certain that the kind of input that you gave and that others are giving is considered in the whole rollout, that there's a kind of mix that can assure that we have the community we're looking for. I've been in this neighborhood, I guess, probably the same amount of time that you have. And I remember using the businesses and going to the places on the street, being able to patronize them, whether it was Alexander's or whether it was Bernice's Twilight Zone. I went to them all. Or the theater, or even when there was a White Castle on their part of the street. So we just have to make sure that we create it in our own image.
I agree.
Yeah, if I can add, and maybe Lisa can speak to this a little bit, but there's a whole program called Neighborhood Opportunity Funds that are going on. And I think we heard last week that there was a young woman architect who is tapping into that program, and maybe we were going to get, I don't know if she's here today. I didn't catch her name last week, but do you guys, anybody on the call remember that from last week? Anyway, I'm just wondering, to me, I believe how these things are to work is that the people, the entrepreneurs who are able to get those awards of the neighborhood opportunity from the neighborhood opportunity funds are potential tenants for these schemes when we have the retail on the ground floor. Am I correct, Lisa?
Yes, there is a number of things that people will have to do in order to qualify for NOF. Existing businesses, but it is available, and there are two types of NOF programs, neighborhood opportunity funds. There's the small NOF that is a consistently rolling basis that they release, and then there's a large NOF where I think the small NOF may go up to between $200,000 and $300,000. But I will pass around that NOF.
Lisa, excuse me.
Yes. Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
So the large NOF is, in the millions of dollars, hundreds of thousands, millions of dollars, and that only occurs every so often. James Harbin is the manager over that program, and we'll bring some more information about that NOF. I have currently the SPIF, the Small Business Improvement Program, had a rollout. And Tanya, Frankie, if you're on the line, doesn't that end tomorrow? Maybe they're gone. So that allowed businesses to do.
Yes, it is tomorrow.
It ends tomorrow. So, right, you're right, Britt. He's over the small. Tim Jeffries is over the large. Thank you, Britt. There are opportunities for entrepreneurs who have at least a lease or for space, and they're developing their program. But I can't speak to it in detail at this moment. But we will have someone. We can actually have an NOF representative join our roundtable to give us more insight on that. But yes, that is available. There are some other programs that we're looking at that we hope to be rolling out in the future. I want to get back on track here. So the team have recommended the 79th Street an exchange site as a catalytic site. It appears that everybody on the round table agrees. I think we were going to walk through each site plan that let's move forward.
Okay.
Yeah, so, and actually I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Catherine Calant, to walk us through the details. She's on here somewhere, I think.
Yeah, thanks, Susan. Hi, everyone. Yeah, so I'll walk through these. So the alternate one site is looking at a new mixed use development on the north parcel. This would have some parking below residential, but then we're proposing that the ground floor have new retail. So we're envisioning that there would still be that iconic corner retail space. And this is, one of the unique Chicago lots with the diagonal street. And so it seems very important to keep it there. A lobby would also be on that ground floor, and then another new retail space. So the idea is that the spaces along the street remain active. And then if you go to the next slide, Nick, basically this is the massing of that. We're looking at kind of having contextual height relationships here. So having the higher side of the building be towards the east, and ideally, depending on the time of year, like Susan mentioned, there might be views to the lake, but definitely over the park. This is looking at a minimum of 60 units, which is kind of the threshold for making it be financeable. And then as we kind of terrace the massing down along the street side, having it be closer to 4 stories, which is what the adjacent building is. And then on the back side, the more residential street, having it be just an outdoor tenant amenity space for them, maybe gardens. It would be focused on whatever the target building population would be. Next slide. So this is the south, which is the same for the south parcel, which is the same for alternate 1 and alternate 2 for the gateway site. It's looking at a new retail space on the corner. Could be retail, perhaps some office space above, retail ground floor. Could be subdivided into maybe some smaller tenant spaces, or perhaps a restaurant, if we have that interest. And then the community incubator space, or restaurant, or not-for-profit offices, perhaps in the Ringler building, and then just surface parking lots to accommodate those uses. And then here's the massing of that. Ideally, maybe some step back of the building to kind of maybe a terrace or something, so that it's not, if we have a more dense site on the north, maybe it sort of helps to balance that on the south, yet still keep the corner active. So option 2 keeps the barber shop movie building and reuses that as retail space, or perhaps keeps the residential space on the 2nd floor. It could be something like live work space, artist studio, something like that. We can kind of meet the needs of what, is marketable and important to the community. A new retail space adjacent to that, and as part of this new mixed-use building development, and then a residential lobby and building space to the west side of the site, and then ground parking below the residential as part of the building. And then we're still continuing to keep the parcel along residential street as tenant exterior amenity space to kind of address the scale of that street. So here you see the massing also kind of steps up as you move east to, ideally have some views, and then 4 stories along the street, so that it's definitely fitting into the context that's already there. It'd be nice to have some terracing for the residents of that building. And then this is also 64 units, so it's kind of meeting that necessary threshold, and I believe 33 parking spaces. If you go to the next slide, we can kind of go through these. You just saw these essentially. It's the same as alternate 1 with new retail in the corner, and then maintaining the Ringler building with a new adaptive reuse. And then the third option is the option that kind of switches things up. So this keeps the barbershop building, and then proposes new retail adjacent to it, to the west of it, a surface parking lot behind, and then keeping a green space, maybe a landscape space on the residential street. And then if you go to the massing, and again, looking at sort of having a terraced approach, perhaps that's office space on the top floor and a roof terrace, which would be a great amenity for people leasing the space. And then the next slide shows the south parcel. So this looks at a mixed use development on the south site. One thing we observed, this is a positive of this site. It's a really great site for a clean slate development, just because it's very orthogonal, and it works well with just standard dimensions of a residential building with a parking lot. Although, that's weighed against the priority of keeping this building that's important to the community. So I'm just putting this out there as an option. It would definitely meet a minimum threshold of 60 units, 30 parking spaces, we're showing here. And so the brown squares you see are ground up townhomes, so like 2 levels where you could enter them individually, or we could look at a different access for them, but they address the residential street scale. A lobby with amenity spaces also in the orange, and then some new retail spaces, still fulfilling the idea of corner retail there, to keep that really active and community focused to the north part of the site. And then here you see from a massing perspective, so some terracing to kind of step the bulk scale of the building back from the street, and the townhomes. And then this strategy might be a bit more cost effective just because of the size of the site. You could have surface parking to meet the needs of the residential component. So with that, I walked you through all the options.
I have a question.
Sure,
If we go with the sites, the options that have, I believe you show parking space. I'm now looking at the track side of the building. What is going to be there? So again, you're talking about this is a visitor's or who's ever riding the metro descent into South Shore. Don't want to just look at parking space and maybe garbage receptacles. So talk to me a little bit about what I would see as I'm riding the train behind those developments that you propose here.
Yeah, so for the north site, we'd have to look at parking within the building or under the building footprint. So you would have the building facade concealing that. You know, it would probably be a solid wall at the ground floor where there's parking. And then up above, I mean, the benefit that we're looking at residential programming here and wrapping units pretty much all around the site is we're going to have a building with lots of windows. And that's going to be very active from all sides because they're residential units. So I think that I haven't really necessarily thought of any of these as having a true backside, primarily because of the residential component of them.
Okay, so the parking then would be underneath the building. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yes, ma'am. On the north side, it would have to be under the building to make the site kind of function and meet the financial needs. On the south side, which it seems like it's not really preferred per your discussion earlier, but we could do surface parking for the residents. However, that would be a landscaped lot with lighting, and it's going to be a nice residential parking lot. Definitely not back of house, but it would be a parking lot behind the building.
All right, thank you.
And actually, oh, sorry, I was going to just add, it's a question of the meaning actually to ask Lisa, that on the south side, to the east of us, where there's the strange sliver space there, I don't know, between our site and the tracks, who owns that property? And
it appears that at first glance, I believe it was the railroad, Metro that owns that property. It wasn't, it wasn't city owned, so that's why it wasn't included in that. But we can always take a look. There's also some type of, I think it's a signage or something on that land as well. Utility pole, right? It's a utility pole there. So Susan, let's talk offline about that.
Yeah, I wasn't thinking necessarily of rolling it into our deal. I guess I was wondering more like potential, like, is there a relationship? Like, could they at least just green it, like beautify it some way?
Sure, let's take a look at that. Ms. Young, I want to thank you for your comments and want to ask that you be sure to have those same questions when we get a response back from the RFP, because that's when it's going to really make sense. We're going to be presented with a conceptual site plan, conceptual elevations, and that is where we can say, hey, wait a minute, there's no back sides to this building. We want it to appear to be, all frontage, right? All front facing facades. And I say that because these are massing suggestions that we're going to put in this RFP. But it's really, those type of comments are really going to be needed when we evaluate the responses to that RFP.
All right then.
Anything else, team? Go back to the questions. What surprised you most about the, in regards to the recommended site, 79th and Exchange? What surprised you the most? What are some of the takeaways about the scenarios presented? And how do you feel about the recommended site? I think we all agree that the Gateway site is the recommended catalytic site, but I just want to try to get some more insight from the stakeholders about how they felt and what surprised you most about some of the massing designs you saw.
I really like the ideas of number 1 and number 2. And I didn't know anything about the Ringler building. I'm very excited. I live just south of it. And so I'm like looking down the street at it right now out my window, and the ideas and opportunities of what could be there are really awesome. I'm very excited. Number 3 seems a little bit heavier on the residential versus what we kind of all said that we want. And that's kind of my feedback.
Thank you, Lisa. Anyone else? Okay. Well, if there's no more comments, Alderman Mitchell, Alderman Harris, do you guys have any comments?
Hi everybody.
Hi, Alderman.
Hey, how's it going? I want to thank everybody for the hard work. This is and will continue to be lots of work, but I'm grateful to hear all the community feedback on it. There are so many things that we are working on behind the scenes that just aren't ready for public disclosure. You know, we have a lot of cleaning up to do behind the scenes on a lot of these projects and things that are going on. But some things are going to begin the catalyst, whether it's the Regal Mall Studios, it'll be opening on what they thought was the 8th Ward side, but it's the 5th Ward side of the universe that will start a catalyst once they begin their project that will help the western end of the corridor, and things will start to kind of fall in line. Generally, everybody, the bodies come first and the amenities come second. That's just the way it works in development, that you got to prove to the universe that you have the numbers that you need. And so the certain projects will happen first, and then everything else will follow. And it kind of happens kind of quickly. So community needs to buckle up and get ready for the ride of a lifetime, because I think that's exactly what it is as we're on the starting point of redeveloping a whole corridor, which is really an amazing process to see it grow and develop. So I would say we're planting the seeds now, but in the spring, we will see our seeds actually produce. So don't give up. Again, it's all about us having, being able to take our vision and make it grow. So just want to thank everybody, the community, DPD, all our new partners, which have been amazing to help us create a vision to show to our community.
Thank you, Alderman Harris. Alderman Mitchell?
Yeah, so definitely want to thank everybody for their participation. It's interesting. I kind of chuckled at myself. I saw the presentation earlier, and when I seen it again and hearing the constituents comment on it, I actually got a little bit more excited. So that, I guess that's a good thing. One thing I do want to add is that one of the, I think it was Ms. Young, commented about the kind of businesses and amenities we want to see. Alderman Harris and I are definitely continues to do our job in being able to talk and attract those businesses that we want. So it's just not, this is a full-on assault. You got DPD, We have the group that has volunteered their time and resources, which definitely appreciative of, and the automatic officers. So we're attacking this from all angles. So we're not just leaving it up on DPD to attract the business or the developer that's coming. We're working with them to let them know those businesses that provide those goods and services that our constituents you all have told us we want to see and have there. We're pushing forward to attract them. So like Alderman Harris said, let's keep up the momentum. It is definitely darkest for the dawn, but once we get this under control, we're going to have a beautiful new 79th Street that we could all brag about and be proud of. So thank you all again.
Thank you, Alderman. Thank you, everyone. We are early. I thought we were going to have we're about 20 minutes early, so I'm going to give everybody their 20 minutes back. Stay tuned. We will be setting up another roundtable to talk about market realities for this development. And so with that being said, I thank you once again and I bid everybody adieu. Have a good day.
Thanks, Lisa. Thanks all.
Thanks,
Thank
Lisa.
you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
This call may be monitored or recorded. For